It's time for the Sports Blitz, the only live-streamed local sports show in Arkansas, with all the latest on the sports stories that matter to you.
Welcome into a Wednesday edition of the Sports Blitz. I am Weldon Braxton, your host. Mark Freeman is currently out. He is attending the signing of Pottsville High School's Michael Perry. Of course, today is National Signing Day. Maddie Lassiter joins us behind the controls, and we are honored to have one Jason Kilburn on the line. Of course, if you've watched or listened to this show, you understand that Jason often contributes in terms of recruiting and just talking about sports in general. So, Jason, how you doing?
Man, I'm doing great. This is a great day for, not just Arkansas fans, but fans all across the country, to find out where their next star is going to be and where all the recruits are coming from. So it's an exciting day in college football.
Couldn't agree with you more. One thing I was saying to you, Jason, and I'll repeat it again here on the air. If you're an Arkansas fan, last night you went to bed with a very good class committed. I say very good, a pretty good class committed. You had solid players across the board. You had a few 4-stars. You had some really solid 3-stars with promise. And all of those players were committed when you went to bed last night. Now, also when you went to bed last night, you were hoping that a pretty good class turned into a very good class with the hopes of Solomon Thomas, the defensive end from the state of Texas, and possibly Demetrius Jackson from Florida. Jason, it didn't work out. Solomon Thomas, he goes ahead and he commits to Stanford. That was sort of the other team. I know UCLA was in the mix, but most people believed it was between Stanford and Arkansas. He chooses Stanford. And then, of course, Demetrius Jackson, a lot of back and forth with him. Some people thought Arkansas had a chance with Jackson. He goes ahead and commits to Miami. But they did land JoJo Robinson. JoJo Robinson, 3 or 4-star. I think most have him as a 4-star receiver from Miami. He's an athlete. He can do some things. He does commit for the Razorbacks. Jason, it didn't get to become that really good class that people thought it could have become with Solomon Thomas and some of the other guys, but I think with Robinson and what they already had committed, it's still a solid class for Coach Bielema.
Yeah, I think it is, especially with this basically being his first year on the job, and from him being, we didn't win a conference game last year, so for him to bring in this class that he got, I think it's a pretty good class. I think Rivals has them rated at 28. Scout has them at 33, and I think 24/7 had them at 30. So it's not a great class by any means. It's not going to set the world on fire, but I think they really got some position of need. And like you were saying, and talking about JoJo Robinson, I think he could be that Joe Adams types that, when we get the ball in his hands, there's a chance that he's a home run hitter and he can take it to the, end zone any time he touches it. And I think him, to go along with, Cody Hollister, I think, the junior college kid that's going to be able to go through spring practice, and Jared Cornelius, I think, is another good wide receiver. So I think they did fill some needs, on where they needed, which I would have liked them seeing maybe get another linebacker, maybe get another safety. But, with, like you were saying, though, last night everybody thought, or I even thought, that Solomon Thomas was going to be a Razorback. On 24/7, the 12 out of the last 14 recruiter experts on there had switched their commitment from Stanford to Arkansas. So I thought he had a really good chance. But then this morning I found out that he took the ACT like 6 or 7 times to try to get into Stanford. So, you never know what's really going on, until you get behind the scenes, and then you hear all the experts leaking out little information here and there. But I think it is going to be a solid class. We could have done better, but I think in his second year to where his record was coming, out of last year, I think this is a solid class.
I agree. I think you look at Arkansas, Jason, 7 wins over the last 2 years, and you're still able to land an arguably top 30, top 35 class with players with promise. I think that's something to be proud of if you're Arkansas and Coach Bielema. There's so much conversation that goes on about recruiting rankings, and when Mark was on, Jason, we all touched on this. how much do recruiting rankings really matter? It's probably one of the oldest debates in sports. It's right up there with, what's more important, Phil Jackson or the players he coached. Think of some of the old sports debates. Whether or not recruiting rankings matter, it's been often debated. My philosophy has always been this, and I still feel the same way. I don't think you can consistently win or compete for championships if you have the number 86 ranked class every year. I'm sorry, you just can't compete if your class ranks number 86 or number 75 year after year. You just can't do it. But at the same time, I don't think you have to have all 11 starters on each side of the ball be 4 and 5 stars. I believe there's a minimum threshold. I think if you can consistently get your recruiting classes in the top 30, then you have a chance to let your coaching, your development, and your eye for talent make up the difference with the Alabama, the LSUs, the Floridas of the world who are consistently in the top 5. So for Arkansas, if they can continue to get these top 30 classes, and if as they play better, they should be able to move up into the top 25, I believe that's enough for Arkansas to compete. I don't think Arkansas has to have a top 10 class. I don't think they have to be right up there with Alabama and LSU. I think they need to get in the top 30 to top 25 to compete year after year. And if they're able to do that, I think Coach Bielema and what his staff can do is enough to make up the difference. Now, Jason, you may not be a consistent 11-win team year after year like those other schools, but you can have 10, 11-win years every 2 or 3 years and not take a huge step back in your other years. That's the way I look at it. What do you think?
I agree with you, Weldon. I don't think Arkansas has to have a top 10 class every year. I agree with that. I think a top 30 class, if you get a top 30 class, there's going to be some players in there that probably develop more than they probably should, and I think the coaching staff that we have up there right now is one that the best that Arkansas has had in a long time. Maybe not the best, but I think it's up there with you could arguably be one of the best that coaching staffs Arkansas has ever had. But, recruits are, if you get a 2-star recruit, he might turn into an All-American. J.J. Watt, we had talked about him a couple weeks ago, or you talk about Ken Hamlin. There's always players that come out of nowhere that, really blossom once they get on into a university and get into a weight room and get into a coaching and stuff. So, it really depends on the player, I think, a lot. And, some players might have a little bit more heart than the others. The other ones might want to, push a little bit more. But I agree with you, though, Weldon, that I think that if Arkansas can get constantly get a 25 to top 30 class, I think they can compete in the SEC.
You're watching the Sports Blitz here. We have Jason Kilburn on the line here live from the Cogswell Motor Studio. Jason, let's just take a look at this class. You look at it right now, a majority of the players have signed. I think only 1 or 2 remain unsigned, and, of course, we know players will sign throughout the day. Just tell us a little bit about this class. Who jumps out at you? Who do you think may be able to play above their rating? Just who do you like?
Okay, Arkansas signed 24 signees on this class, and it looks like they're pretty much done after that. We're supposed to sign up to 26, so I guess they'll hold those 2 over till next year unless they get some surprise, a gray shirt, maybe a possibility of like a Darius Philon or something, that's been committed to another school, and, now they're telling him that he needs a gray shirt. So unless there's a surprise like that, I think we're pretty much sold on the 24 that we have. Some of the players that jump out to me, Jerry Cornelius, I think he's going to be a really good wide receiver. I think, with him going through spring practice, I think he's going to have a chance to really compete for maybe not a starting position, but I think for definitely some quality playing time his freshman year. Rafe Peavy at quarterback, I think he's going to be good too. He's getting to go through spring practice, so I expect him to battle, Brandon Allen maybe for the starting job. Everybody knows about Rafe Peavy, what he brings to the table with his arm, with his legs, with just being a team leader. I think he can really progress and be a good player for Arkansas. Chris Murphy, he's going to go through spring practice, and I think he's a good cornerback that I think has a chance to compete for some playing time this year. Cornelius Floyd, a cornerback out of Florida, I think he's got a chance to play this year. I really like him a lot. Frank Ragnow. Now, I know these offensive linemen, I'm probably going to get caught up a little bit in these offensive linemen because it seems like every single one of them they're bringing in is highly rated. That a bunch of schools across the country has really wanted them. And, Frank Ragnow, I think he's going to be a stud for us in time. He's from Minnesota. And then another offensive lineman that you got to look at is, Brian Wallace out of St. Louis, Missouri. I think he has a chance to come in and play right away, just like Skipper and Kirkland did last year. I think he's that type of player that can come in and be phenomenal his freshman year, and be able to compete for a starting position. He played in the U.S. Army All-American game and really played well against some of the top-notch talent that was in that game. Another offensive lineman that I like a lot is Javon Pruitt out of Texas. He had offers from all over the country. He could have went anywhere, and I think he's got a chance to, maybe redshirt this first year and then really compete for a starting position after that. Another offensive lineman that nobody really talked about too much is he signed in the early signing period with a junior college kid out of Iowa Western Community College, Sebastian Triatola. He signed early in the signing period, but he wasn't able to enroll early, so he had to re-sign today. But I think he's got a chance to compete at the guard position. And I think every one of the offensive linemen that we got are going to be phenomenal players. And I think, every game, in my opinion, the football games are won in the trenches. If your offensive lineman can get a good block, or protect the quarterback, I think that's humongous. I think that's where all the, your quarterback's going to have more time and your running backs are going to have lanes to open up. But, Anthony Brown is going to be, I think, a good defensive end. Randy Ramsey, I think, is going to be a good linebacker. We'd already talked about JoJo Robinson. I think he's going to be phenomenal. I think he is the, Joe Adams type, a Jarius Wright type, that once he gets his ball in his hands, I think he has a chance to take it to the distance. Cole Hudlin, I think he's going to, nobody really talks about him just because he's a kicker. But, he was a parade All-American, U.S. Army All-American, USA Today All-American. He has all these accolades, and I think even one recruiting service had him rated as the number one kicker in the country. So, I expect him to come in and play right away, to take over from what Zach Hawker did. So I'm expecting good things out of him, too. But, I really like this class. Josh Liddell's another one. I think he's going to be a good safety out of Dollarway. I think he's going to be one of those players that under-the-radar players like Corliss Marshall was last year. I think Liddell can be that type of player. And, of course, I have to mention Bijan Jackson. I think he's probably one of the better players in this class, if not the best player. And defensive tackle is a position, that Arkansas needs some bodies there, and I think he has a chance to come in and compete for a lot of playing time as a true freshman. But, I think all of them are pretty good players, but those are some of the ones that I think are really going to be good these first couple of years, that they don't have to redshirt, that they can come in and compete for playing time right away.
Yeah, you mentioned Jackson, Bijan Jackson. He, of course, is somebody who's been committed for a long time, one of the first players to commit in this Arkansas class of 2014. And I almost feel like he's the Hunter Henry of this year's class. And by that I mean, highly touted player, one of the best players in the class, committed early, so you just kind of forget about him. You forget you've got a 4-star caliber player. Of course, Hunter Henry went on to be one of the best freshman tight ends in the country last year, and Jackson's expected to be a really good freshman defensive lineman. For me, Jason, one thing I like that Arkansas is competing, and I like that they're building the way they want to build a team. We know Coach Bielema's philosophy on offense, it starts up front. And so it would concern me if his first two classes were weak along the offensive line, because that would tell me that would put Arkansas 2 years behind getting where they're trying to get. But the fact is, his first offensive line class last year was solid. You got a couple of starters out of that group. You've got possibly 1 or 2 starters out of this year's group. His strength is being put in place right away. I think that's a good sign in terms of how quickly Arkansas can be competitive. But Jason, one thing that's really hung over not just the offense but the whole recruiting process and really the whole program is what's going on with the defensive coordinator search. We've heard so many things. We've heard the Smith, the former Tampa Bay Buccaneers linebacker coach. We've heard about, of course, Randy Shannon, who is currently the linebacker staff and one of the top recruiters on the staff. Should he have gotten the job already? If he doesn't have it now, does that mean he won't get it, or are they waiting till after signing day? What do you think about this whole mystery around the defensive coordinator position?
Man, that's a very good question. I think a lot about everybody's got their own little insight, or think that this is going to happen. Now, my personal opinion, I think it's going to be Randy Shannon, and a couple reasons I think that. I think that they brought in a lot of defensive talent, the last 2 or 3 weeks in the recruiting class. And I think for them to bring in defensive players and, for them to say, well, we don't know who the defense coordinator is, so we really don't know what scheme really we're going to be running. I just think that I don't think Bielema would do that. I think, that I think it's going to be Randy Shannon, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons why is just because they brought so much talent in, and I think it would be hard for them to sell the program if they didn't even know who the defensive coach was going to be or, what scheme they were going to run now. I mean, that's my opinion, but I think it's going to be Randy Shannon. And from every report that I've been seeing, it's either going to be announced later on today or tomorrow. So we should hear something shortly, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, and the whole contract from Miami thing, I think, it sounds like that got blown up pretty quickly. I mean, that was kind of a hot deal a couple of weeks ago as far as why Randy Shannon hadn't been named defensive coordinator yet. But I don't know. It seems like a lot of people shot holes in that, and maybe that's not true. Maybe that's not the case. I don't know. I mean, from the talk that I've heard, and it's all hearsay. We're in the hearsay business. Whether we like it or not, that's what we're in. From what I've been hearing, the players, a lot of the recruits, know more than we know. I guess so that could lead you to believe that Coach Bielema and the staff and the guys close to the program, they've given a pretty good indicator in terms of who the defensive coordinator might be, and maybe that helped them feel more comfortable. It still doesn't answer why it hasn't been announced publicly, but I've gotten indications that the players and the recruits know who the guy is going to be. We still don't know. So
yeah, and I think if it was somebody else besides Randy Shannon, I think he would have already came out and announced it. This is all just speculation on my part, but that's what I think.
Yeah, I agree. Who else could it be? You would think, well, is it a Bronco or is a Seahawk assistant coach? It doesn't look like that. If it was, I said this Monday, it better be a Seahawk assistant. I don't want it to be a Bronco assistant, but that's something we'll continue to monitor. When we come back from break, we're going to talk more recruiting. We're going to talk about Arkansas overall and where they stand in recruiting. Better they could be doing to be landing more players. We're going to get into that as well as our local sports, so don't go away.
Hi folks, Richard Roberts with Cogswell Motors in Russellville. We've been in business since 1949. A dealership doesn't stay in business that long under the same ownership unless you're doing something right, and that's taking care of customers. We have the largest selection of new Ford, Lincoln, Mazda, and pre-owned vehicles in the River Valley. So if you want the most for your trade, the best interest rate on financing, and the best price on a new or pre-owned automobile, come to Russellville and see us. We're at 1900 East Main, or visit us on the web at cogswellmotors.com.
If you didn't count on KARK4 today this morning,
here's what you missed.
Updated news.
Police continue searching for suspects after a home intrusion overnight.
Developing stories.
There's another piece of presidential history turning up here in Arkansas.
And weather and traffic on the force.
Friday night, Saturday morning will bring us our next chance rain.
Every 10 minutes.
Around the clock.
Making your day easier.
So rise and shine and count on.
Count on.
Count on. KRK4 today.
RiverValleyLeader.com is the #1 local source for instant news in the River Valley, offering HD video and live streaming along with top-notch coverage of all the news and events around the area. The River Valley Leader is the only place to go for all the information you need. Check out the newest local business featured on the site, as well as police news and coverage from important meetings, along with the personal stories, all at one convenient click.
check out rivervalleyleader.com.
Today, there are more than 20 brands of cars being sold in America. So to be noticed, Ford and Cogswell Motors have to go further than anyone thought we could. How does Ford stand out above the crowd? Not just with plug-in vehicles like the new 2013 Ford Fusion Energy that gets a projected 100 miles per gallon equivalent, but also with a line of gas vehicles equipped with the innovative EcoBoost engines combining power and efficiency, plus a full measure of technologically advanced features. We invite you to stop into Cogswell Motors today. We go further than anyone thought we could, so that you can go further too.
Welcome back into the Sports Blitz today on a Wednesday, National Signing Day, of course, the most prevalent topic today, but we are covering a variety of things. Local sports, our Mattress Max local sports segment. Of course, National Signing Day isn't just about the big schools and the big 4- and 5-star players. It's also about players here locally in the River Valley who are signing. In fact, as we told you on the top of the show, Mark is not here because he is attending the signing of Pottsville's Michael Perry, the dual sport athlete today, signing with Arkansas Tech. Also, Russellville Cyclone wide receiver Jalen Curtis signing with Arkansas Tech. And then Austin Robinson of Russellville will be signing a baseball letter of intent with Crowder College, and then Cyclone quarterback Cody Jones will be signing with Lyon College. Of course, the program at Lyon getting back underway. They're going to get things started pretty soon, and I can tell you what, to start with a guy like Cody Jones is certainly a good thing. Basketball action, of course, a lot of teams were off in the area on a Tuesday, but the Pottsville Apaches will be back in action on tomorrow as they travel to Waldron. Mark and I have talked about Pottsville playing better basketball lately. It looks like they found their stride under Coach Thurman, and so they'll take on Waldron. Rivalry time, of course, Russellville and Conway will square off on Friday. Russellville did not play yesterday. Of course, we know the Cyclones went to Conway and won in a hostile environment. They'll try to do the same thing again, this time at home. And then the Clarksville Panthers taking on one of their 5A West rivals, the Alma Airedales. That game will be in Clarksville. If you remember, the Panthers went to the Palace, as they like to refer to it, in Alma, and the Panthers went on a 20-0 run during that game to help separate themselves. So high school basketball coming up on Friday. Mark and I will be back in here on Friday morning to detail that a little bit more. But I believe we are currently joined on the phone by Brad Caldwell. Brad, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Brad, I'm great. It's National Signing Day. I don't know if you caught the top of the show, but one thing I've been telling people was that if you're an Arkansas fan and when you went to bed last night, you went to bed with a good committed class. And I just say that to sort of ease the disappointment, of course, of Solomon Thomas going to Stanford, Demetrius Jackson committing to the University of Miami. Brad, your overall impressions of this Razorback class?
I agree with you. I think it was an overall solid class. I think they filled some needs that they needed for next year, safety being one of them. They signed 5 guys that play in the defensive backfield, so that's going to help quite a bit. And then the offensive lineman class is really stellar. I think when you put it out there, I think that the offensive line class looks really good. I think that they got a good wide receiver class, which was kind of surprising. And I think Peavy's a very solid quarterback, so that was another one that was a good one. I think overall that this is a class that, even though it doesn't rank highly, and when you look at the SEC and you see all these highly ranked classes, you think, oh, well, they can't compete. But that's not necessarily the case. I think that they have some good players already up there, guys like Alex Collins and Hunter Henry and these other guys that they've added this year are going to do nothing but help. But, yeah, it was a disappointing morning to think that Solomon Thomas, the guy that we thought was seemed like all the tea leaves pointed toward him coming to Arkansas, but it just didn't work out. And who can blame a kid for going to Stanford right now? I mean, they're an incredible football program, and they're also an incredible academic institution. So kid had an opportunity of a lifetime, and he took it. So there's nothing to be ashamed of as a Hog fan. Like you said with Jackson was a guy that local Hog Sports writers or recruiting writers said that he was coming to Arkansas, but the kid kept saying he was going to Miami, and they just kept saying he's coming to Arkansas, you know. So I don't know the deal with that. I'd like to see the story on that one. But Arkansas did get another guy that they had been waiting on, JoJo Robinson, a guy that helps that wide receiver class out, a Joe Adams type of guy, an explosive type of guy who will help immediately. So I think the class turned out pretty good.
Yeah, I think so too. And one thing I said before was I like that Coach Bielema, the pieces to implement his philosophy have gone in right away. You look at that offensive line class last year, you were able to get a couple of starters out of there. You may get a lot of help in this year's class. It would concern me knowing that he would want to be a physical, downhill running type offense, yet he wasn't able to bring in very good offensive linemen. But the fact that he has these last two classes has really impressed me. You know, you look at the quarterback position, Brad, and this is one thing I want to get into with you because I know you've been outspoken about this. Rafe Peavy, highly touted freshman, is coming in. It's always concerning when you talk about the possibility of a true freshman starting in the SEC, but I think from a talent standpoint, it wouldn't be surprising if he were to win that job. How do you see, as they go, of course, into fall camp and they get ready to go from that standpoint, how do you see the quarterback position shaking out?
Well, that's a good question. And, you know, my initial thoughts on the Arkansas quarterback situation is this. Brandon Allen is 3-10 as a starter, 0-9 in the SEC. And I don't know of any other kid that I can think of, especially in the SEC, that started off so horribly and turned out to be a decent quarterback when it all turned around. I just haven't seen it. And so now I begin to wonder, is he going to be able to get it done? And at that point, you've got to think, okay, what does Arkansas have that might be able to replace him? Well, you've got his younger brother, which that is a never a good situation to begin with. Arkansas has already been through that one time where we tried to replace older brother with younger brother, and it just didn't work out the way that Arkansas had hoped it would. Then you've got a kid in Dewalt Mitchell that is athletic. You know, you don't know a whole lot else about him, but, you know, the rumor continues to be that he will probably end up being a wide receiver more than he will be a quarterback, but you never know. And so you come down the line, and here's Peavy, and Peavy's a kid that has fared well in all of the camps. He's a kid that has looked pretty good in certain situations, including the All-American game where his team couldn't move the ball until he got in the game, and he moved them down the field, scored a couple touchdowns. Does that mean that he can compete on the SEC level? I don't think that would be an indicator, but at the same time, you got to say that he's got a little bit of moxie about him. It seems like he's got some confidence. That's a good thing when you're trying to find a quarterback, and throws the ball pretty well. He's a little bit undersized, but he runs it pretty well. He's more of a dual threat type of quarterback. So I think that him being there in the spring is going to do nothing but help his opportunity. And like I said, I think that the door is wide open for somebody to step in there. So we'll see what happens. I couldn't sit here and say, yes, that's going to happen. If you asked me today what I would say I'd feel a whole lot better if Rafe Peavy was taking snaps than Brandon Allen. But, you know, they're not asking me.
Sure, I don't think you're the only one who feels that way. I do have to take this moment to announce to the public that the legend Mark Freeman has returned. He is in studio, and you will be seeing him. You'll be seeing him right now. You'll see him right now. He will be joining us here in a second. Brad, I want to take a step back and look at some recruiting dynamics here because, you know, we've talked about this before. Mark and I have been over it. Tennessee, 17 four-star commits. I assume they're all signees by now, or nearly all of them. Ole Miss, another good class. We know about the outstanding class they had last year. I get the USC and the Floridas of the world, their advantages over Arkansas, but Ole Miss, Tennessee, I know Tennessee's got some tradition and some history. They have, you know, a little bit more talent in state, but not to the tune of 17 four-stars and what Ole Miss did last year. What's the recruiting dynamic? Is there something that those schools aren't doing that Arkansas is not doing, or you know, where is all that situated in your mind?
Well, I don't have an answer for you there. I mean, I think that the natural thought would be that they're cheating, especially Ole Miss. But I mean, I don't know that for sure. There's no concrete proof to say that, but especially Ole Miss. But Tennessee has they've got just a locality of recruits, not necessarily in Tennessee, but I mean, you're not very far from Birmingham. You're not very far from Atlanta. You're not even that far from Ohio, in that matter. And so you're in if you drew a circle 250 miles from Knoxville, Tennessee, to the surrounding areas, I think you'd find out that they have a very fertile recruiting area just in that circle. And I think that helps tremendously when you're talking about recruits. Ole Miss is the same way, but Ole Miss has also went out and they have hired a big-time staff to recruit, and that's what they've done, and they went out and recruited hard. I think people are kidding themselves if they really think that stuff doesn't go on, and including at Arkansas. But I guess Ole Miss is just a little better at it, and Tennessee may be just a little better at it than Arkansas is.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to explain. It just jumps out at you. We see how Tennessee, they've been through several head coaches the last few years, and you're right, they do have a fertile recruiting radius. It's just the disparity between what they've done and what Arkansas has done just makes you wonder. Real quick, Brad, before we go to break, I want to get your take on tonight's Razorback basketball game against Alabama. What do you think? Of course, Harris and Quall suspended on Saturday. They've been reinstated. Where do you see Arkansas as the program and where they're headed, and where do you see the game against Alabama tonight?
Well, tonight's a must-win. I'd say that. I think they will win just because it's a home game. Alabama hasn't played all that well. So I think this is a game that Arkansas needs to take. And not only do they need to take it, but they need to build on this win. And, they have a chance to go into Vanderbilt, a team that hasn't been great this year, have a chance to go in there and maybe win a game there too, but they've got to build on this win tonight if they can win it. If they lose tonight, I would say that you can pretty much call it the season. It's over. If they win tonight, they've still got some opportunities, but they've got to start winning, and that's the bottom line at this point. They need to find whatever they found at the first part of the season, playing against Minnesota and playing decent against Gonzaga out at Maui, and they need to kind of channel that and find out where they're at and play like that. And if they could do that, I think that they'll be okay moving forward, and they may not be able to get to the NCAA tournament, but if they can even get an NIT berth this year would be considered some progress. So I think that they've got to just shoot for trying to take each game one game at a time and try to make the best of each one of them.
Good stuff from Brad Caldwell. Brad, thank you for joining us. Feel free to join us anytime. When we come back from break, the legend will be back in his post. He was at Michael Perry's signing. He'll give us updates from that. Of course, I'm talking about Mark Freeman, the man who runs this show. So we'll get into that and much more when we come back.
Hi folks, Richard Roberts with Cogswell Motors in Russellville. We've been in business since 1949. A dealership doesn't stay in business that long under the same ownership unless you're doing something right, and that's taking care of customers. We have the largest selection of new Ford, Lincoln, Mazda, and pre-owned vehicles in the River Valley. So if you want the most for your trade, the best interest rate on financing, and the best price on a new or pre-owned automobile, come to Russellville and see us. We're at 1900 East Main, or visit us on the web at cogswellmotors.com.
If you didn't count on KARK4 today this morning,
Here's what you missed.
updated news,
Police continue searching for suspects after a home intrusion overnight.
developing stories,
There's another piece of presidential history turning up here in Arkansas.
and weather and traffic on the force.
Friday night, Saturday morning will bring us our next chance of rain.
Every 10 minutes.
Around the clock.
Making your day easier.
So rise and shine and count on.
Count on.
KRK4 today.
RiverValleyLeader.com is the #1 local source for instant news in the River Valley, offering HD video and live streaming along with top-notch coverage of all the news and events around the area. The River Valley Leader is the only place to go for all the information you need. Check out the newest local business featured on the site, as well as police news and coverage from important meetings, along with the personal stories, all at one convenient click. Check out rivervalleyleader.com.
Today, there are more than 20 brands of cars being sold in America. So to be noticed, Ford and Cogswell Motors have to go further than anyone thought we could. How does Ford stand out above the crowd? Not just with plug-in vehicles like the new 2013 Ford Fusion Energy that gets a projected 100 miles per gallon equivalent, but also with a line of gas vehicles equipped with the innovative EcoBoost engines combining power and efficiency, plus a full measure of technologically advanced features. We invite you to stop into Cogswell Motors today. We go further than anyone thought we could, so that you can go further too.
Welcome back to a Wednesday on the Sports Blitz. Very big appreciation to Mr. Weldon Braxton for holding down the fort while I was off at Pottsville High School for the signing. Really appreciate the red carpet being rolled out by the Pottsville faithful out there. They really know how to make you feel welcome over there. Mark Freeman, Weldon Braxton, Maddie Lassiter in the Cogswell Motors studios. We're going to play for you just a moment, a little bit of audio from Michael Perry talking about his decision to sign with the Arkansas Tech Wonder Boys. Man, it was a really cool event, really, to be out there. And if you've never been to a signing at Pottsville, it's a little different. I'm going today to Russellville at 3:30. What they do is after school, they just allow people to come together, finger foods, that kind of thing, and then they sign at 3:30. But at Pottsville, they bring you out during class at 10:30, 11 o'clock, and then they bring the whole school, all the administration, your coaches, your family, and they make a big deal out of it. I like that. The way they do that quite a bit. But I got to talk to Michael Perry about his decision, and we're going to play for you right now. Maddie, you ready for it? A little bit from Michael Perry just a moment ago. We're here with new Arkansas Tech basketball and football signee, Michael Perry. Michael, I've been talking for a couple of years about how you had a tough decision to make, and now the decision's been made a little easier now that you can get to go play both. Congratulations on a big day.
Oh, yeah, just, not everyone gets this opportunity, and I'm very blessed. And, I just want to thank everyone and thank my coaches, my friends and family and everyone that's made this opportunity possible.
Now, I know Coach Monica and Coach Carlson couldn't really talk a whole lot about you beforehand. Now that you've signed, do you know a little bit, and I'll get some word from them, about what you're going to be doing at the next level in both sports?
Yes, in basketball I'll be playing, the point guard position, which I've played, all 4 years here. And then on the football side, starting as soon as basketball ends this year, I'll start working at corner, and I'll be playing defensive back.
Okay. Looks like Michael's going to be playing cornerback and point guard for the Arkansas Tech Wonder Boys. I was talking before the signing with a couple coaches, and they didn't know if he would end up at cornerback or at wide receiver, but they were actually talking about a chance of him playing both at Tech. And you got to think, man, he's already going to be a two-sport guy, and then to have a chance at playing both sports and then playing both sides of the ball in one of them, that would have been a whole lot. So I think cornerback will suit him, but if it doesn't, they'll put him at wide receiver.
Yeah, and I think when you have a multi-talented player like Michael, it's easy to want, of course, you want him to play multiple sports and you want him to play multiple positions within a sport. But I do think you do have to be careful with that, because you want a player to have an identity, and if you're spreading, especially when you're a young player and you're spreading yourself thin, trying to learn, the defense and the coverages and the concepts, trying to learn the concepts on offense, you can spread yourself so thin to where you're not really making yourself better at a given position. And so I think with Michael having a distinct identity of he's going to go out and start on the defensive side of the football, at least start his career playing that side of the ball. And, of course, he can always move, but I think he'll have a single-minded purpose, a single-minded focus. I think that'll allow him to excel. And you look at his size and his body stature, I think it really suits him playing a defensive back. Ian, if you talk about the NFL and going up to that next level, I think that would probably be the best suit for him. Not saying he can't be a successful receiver, but I would certainly project him to be able to go as far as he can go in the defensive backfield. Of course, we know he's an outstanding basketball player. Of course, we've been talking Pottsville Apache basketball this year. They've got a big one coming up tomorrow night against Waldron, I believe, right?
Yeah, I'd have to look for sure to make sure. But yeah, they've got a big 4A4 schedule left with a couple tough games for sure.
Yeah, so I mean he's going to get it done on the court, Coach K. And one point that you brought up, and I didn't really think about it, but you could be right, is Coach Monty and Coach K, they could be betting on themselves a little bit. Maybe after a year or two, they're hoping Michael says, I'm done with this sport. I'm done with that sport. I'm going to go play full-time for Coach so-and-so in this sport, So we'll see how it goes.
One of the favorite players that I've covered in my limited time doing this, being 4 years of covering Michael, has been a really cool thing, and it was a really neat event. We'll share some pictures at rivervalleyleader.com. You can go to facebook.com/RVL News to find out. To see some pictures and some more of that. And again, I'll be at Russellville High School this afternoon, 3:30. Cody Jones, Jalen Curtis. Jalen's going to join Michael Perry at Arkansas Tech. He's going to play wide receiver. And Cody Jones, that's well mentioned, going to Lyon College, and he's going to be right in the hunt for the starting quarterback job right there as he walks in the door. That's a big deal.
It can't get more open than it is right now.
With no starting quarterback, it can't get more open than it is right now, man. The tweets are flying in right now as far as who's in, who's out. Arkansas now up to, let me see, how many signees do they have? I see that Randy Ramsey is the latest signee. He's a 6'4", 215 linebacker out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I know you mentioned some of the guys that Arkansas didn't get, and Brad talked about how this was a decent class. I think they filled some needs. I do wish that they had gotten Solomon Thomas, and I was looking at ESPN.com, and he's got a tree on the front of the table there, and he's on ESPN.com's front page. Man, it'd be nice to get that sort of front page attention. It's the second time in 3 years that Arkansas's had an opportunity at one of these guys. Now, Doriel Green-Beckham was an even bigger get at the time, but you remember the microphone that was supposed to be off, and the guy said, "It's Arkansas. It's Arkansas." Yeah. And he comes on there, and he puts on the Missouri hat, and it just tears the hearts out of all Razorback fans. It just seems like that's the way it goes for us Hog fans. I'm sorry. I don't want to feel sorry for ourselves all day, because this is a pretty good class, but it just stinks when you've got a chance at big time recruits and they choose to go somewhere else.
Let's just hope that this big time signee that didn't go to Arkansas, let's hope this one stays off the weed. It was the last one that has had recurring issues with that. But you're right, Mark. It is disappointing. We've acknowledged that. Obviously, you'd like to get those guys. You want as many talented players as you can get on your team. But from a coaching standpoint, I know Coach Bielema will say this. Coaches will say it all the time when they miss on a player. They'll say, "Well, I just want to coach and love up the players I do have. I don't want to spend my energy on the guys we don't have." And I'm sure that'll be the speak you get from the coaching staff. But I know they're disappointed. Solomon Thomas, not only is he a talented player, he would have addressed a need. And that's really sort of a double whammy effect. But I do think they addressed themselves at linebacker and on the defensive line. I would say they addressed areas of need, but that's pretty much saying they addressed everything, since everything is an area of need. Mark, I want to get your take, and Brad touched on it. The quarterback position. Rafe Peavy now officially signed, sealed, and committed. Brandon Allen, he's had a hurt shoulder. He'll be back. Austin Allen will be in the mix. Can you see a true freshman starting for the Hogs in 2014?
I'll say I hope not, because I hope that Brandon Allen with 3 years in the system is better than Rafe Peavy when he walks in the door. But if Rafe Peavy's good enough, then okay. I would rather see a redshirt freshman take the job than a true freshman, because I did see a lot in that U.S. Army All-American game from Rafe Peavy to tell me that he can be a really good quarterback in the future. Like the intangibles that you hear about, obviously you can't see intangibles, and a lot of physical skills that he's got and the way he carries himself, the way he runs a team. That team that he was on in the U.S. Army All-American game was getting worked. No, it was Under Armour game. Yeah. Excuse me, and they were getting worked over pretty good, and he came in the game and he let them down to points, and then he let them down again and they missed a field goal, and then he let them down again. He was a steadying force, and I hope he can be that for Arkansas, but I hope it's a couple years from now, because that tells me that these other guys are able to get the job done, because in 2 years, or we'll be talking about either Rafe Peavy or Ty Story, and at the end of their careers, the Allen brothers, Brandon will be toward the end of his career. Austin will have probably another year left. But the conversation is about to get really interesting for Arkansas quarterback. But to answer your question, I hope Brandon Allen improves enough in the system that he can be successful and get Arkansas to at least a bowl game.
Yeah, I think so too. I think if he's talented enough and if he's outplaying guys who've been on campus longer, that's not a good sign. But you just go with it because it gives you the best chance to win. So I guess to sum up what I think, I guess what you think too is you hope he's not the guy that gives you the best chance to win because you hope the returning guys are better.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'm looking here at Arkansas signees. Yeah, Sean Caldwell, man. I love the dude. He's one of my best friends. And hearing him talk, you'd think that the world had ended. He tweets, seriously, this has to be one of the worst days of my life. Arkansas's got 24 signees. Jason Kilburn, who was on with us in the first segment, says that that's probably going to be the class. Now, there is a guy, Ty Thibodeau, who has been offered by Arkansas and Louisville, and you want to go up against Bobby Petrino and get that win. But Ty Thibodeau right now is on the hook. We're trying to decide. He's going to try to decide who he's going to choose. Arkansas could be end up with 25 signees in a class. Now, I know you may think that that's all they can get, but they can sign one back to last year, so they have 2 spots. They may end up with 2 open spots or even 1 open spot this year. Weldon, I want to get your thoughts on that because, in my opinion, with such a crappy year you had last year, you want to take as much talent as you can possibly get. I don't see any reason you would hold over spots this year. I would go back and fill last year's spot too, get that extra, that 26th signee if I could, because you want to improve as fast as you possibly can and get better on the field today. You can't wait till next year if you're this coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you can get players who can help you, if there's players out there and you still have available spots for them, there's no reason to turn them down. Now, I mean, obviously you're not going to reach for a 190-pound offensive guard just because you need to fill numbers.
No.
But at the same time, it sounds like this kid is somebody who can actually help you. You are a team who is in need at a variety of positions. So, no, I don't think there's any reason to count back. It's not like the NBA draft where you can say, well, this 2014 draft class is going to be great, so let's try to stockpile picks for that next draft.
Yeah,
I mean, it's recruiting. It's high school athletes. You don't know what's going to be a great class, what's not going to be. You don't know who you can and can't get. So if the picking is good for good players and you got room, you take advantage.
All right, we got to hit a break. Maddie just showed me something a minute ago. The rich getting richer, man. Alabama #1 recruiting class in the nation by everyone, and Auburn native and 5-star linebacker Rashawn Evans had Auburn #1 on his list, flipped to Alabama today. 5-star linebacker. Isn't that just their luck? I can't wait until Alabama and Auburn aren't as good anymore. That's just maybe wishful thinking, maybe a long time before that happens, but I'm just ready for Arkansas to get better. I don't know if you're on the board with me and you're hoping that Arkansas can improve rapidly, but like we talked about with the quarterback conversation, we want to see the best man win. We want to see that best man be better than he was last year.
Oh, yeah.
All right, we've got to wrap things up right after this break. Stay with us.
Hi folks, Richard Roberts with Cogswell Motors in Russellville. We've been in business since 1949. A dealership doesn't stay in business that long under the same ownership unless you're doing something right, and that's taking care of customers. We have the largest selection of new Ford, Lincoln, Mazda, and pre-owned vehicles in the River Valley. So if you want the most for your trade, the best interest rate on financing, and the best price on a new or pre-owned automobile, come to Russellville and see us. We're at 1900 East Main, or visit us on the web at cogswellmotors.com.
If you didn't count on KARK4 today this morning,
here's what you missed.
Updated news.
Police continue searching for suspects after a home intrusion overnight.
Developing stories.
There's another piece of presidential history turning up here in Arkansas.
And weather and traffic on the force.
Friday night, Saturday morning will bring us our next chance of rain.
Every 10 minutes.
Around the clock.
Making your day easier.
So rise and shine and count on.
Count on.
KRK4 today.
RiverValleyLeader.com is the #1 local source for instant news in the River Valley, offering HD video and live streaming along with top-notch coverage of all the news and events around the area. The River Valley Leader is the only place to go for all the information you need. Check out the newest local business featured on the site, as well as police news and coverage from important meetings, along with the personal stories, all at one convenient click. Check out rivervalleyleader.com.
Today, there are more than 20 brands of cars being sold in America. So to be noticed, Ford and Cogswell Motors have to go further than anyone thought we could. How does Ford stand out above the crowd? Not just with plug-in vehicles like the new 2013 Ford Fusion Energy that gets a projected 100 miles per gallon equivalent, but also with a line of gas vehicles equipped with the innovative EcoBoost engines combining power and efficiency, plus a full measure of technologically advanced features. We invite you to stop into Cogswell Motors today. We go further than anyone thought we could, so that you can go further too.
Welcome to National Signing Day at rivervalleyleader.com here on the Sports Blitz. It's Wednesday. We appreciate you taking time to join us. Arkansas 24 signees in this 2014 signing class, hoping to turn things around for a Razorback football team that obviously had a rough time at the end of last year. Jason was talking earlier on about the 24 signees possibly being it for Arkansas. And, you know, I pointed out, and my thought was, man, you don't want to just take anybody, like Weldon and Jason said, but, man, you got to fill this class out. Go find somebody who, even if it's a project that you think, you know, has really, really high potential, obviously you don't want to take somebody who's crappy, but somebody who you think can play and who you think can help you, even if it's a couple years down the road. But, you know, do something. I would prefer, obviously, to have somebody who's going to have an immediate impact, because right now Arkansas needs immediate impact guys. And they were selling the heck out of that freshman All-American university here, and that's sort of depressing that you have to have so many freshmen All-American, because you got guys that have to contribute immediately because everybody else on your team sucks. So I'm hoping that Arkansas can fill the class with good players, and like Weldon said, not go with the NBA draft. You know, let's tank for, you know, suck for luck. Let's rigging for Wiggins is what they're what they were calling the NBA draft. But I'm hoping that Arkansas will fill this class nicely. Lots of folks, man. I'm reading Hogville, the Monday Morning Quarterback, and the recruiting forum, and you got guys on the recruiting forum saying this is a pretty solid class, and then you got the very first guy on the Monday Morning Quarterback saying, the headline is, I swear Bielema has got to be nuts, long-lost son. Think about it. Hard-headed when it comes to offense. 3-star brigade is intact. There are folks on both sides of the coin here as far as the recruiting class goes, but we know that it's about getting this system implemented, hopefully naming a defensive coordinator in the near future. I know Jason said that it could possibly even happen today, and then getting things rolling in the right direction. It just all depends on whether or not you trust Coach Bielema and the defensive staff, and as well as we trust the offensive staff to get it done.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, as much as I like Houston Nutt, he didn't win 3 Big Ten titles, so you know, I think there's a divorce in that comparison right there. But I will say this: now, National Signing Day, I don't know how many players are left. You know, usually players sign today, but it is important to remember that today is really an opening for signing day. It's not like you have to sign today or today's the last day. Today's the first day you can sign. We hype this day up because that's when, 80-90% of players sign. But, of course, we saw in Arkansas last year, our top prize did not sign on National Signing Day due to
reasons outside of his control.
Extenuating circumstances. But, and I guess I really look at this more, from my standpoint, it's important because, junior college, National Signing Day is a big deal, but, you get the fall-through players from the bigger schools, and so really post-signing day is big for that. But it can also be big for bigger schools, too. You know how the numbers work. We see some of these teams who have classes of, 28, 29, 30 to 35 players, and they can't fit them, and guys are going to get squeezed out, and guys who are going to have offers on the table, that maybe they didn't get their letter of intent from the school because they're like, well, sorry, when it came down to crunching numbers, you're not one of our guys, sorry. And so then they're scrambling for another school, and it may take a few days. So, I guess that just goes back to the point about filling the class and how Arkansas may or may not have opportunities to get additional players in the coming days. I don't know if they do, but I just think it's something that's possible.
Well, let's switch gears here to Arkansas basketball. We talked a little bit about it earlier on in the show. I heard you guys mention the Alabama game tonight. We got 4 tickets we're giving away today, right now, from the Gala Creek Country Club giveaway. So
Awesome.
Looking forward to sending somebody on their way with 4 tickets to tonight's game. 7 o'clock tip at Bud Walton Arena, Arkansas, Alabama. Alabama 9-12 overall, 3-5 in the SEC. They're ahead of Arkansas in the standings with 3 SEC wins. But I like what Brad said, what you said earlier about how this is basically almost a win-or-go-home type game for Arkansas, because if you lose this game at home, you know the guys have laid down.
Yeah, I mean, that's really what it's about. I mean, you know, we don't talk tournament around here anymore, NCAA, and we barely talk NIT, and I almost think that doesn't even matter. I just think if you lose this game, it represents so much more than just your loss in the NCAA tournament. I mean, the Missouri game, that was big in the context of your NCAA tournament hopes, I believe. And then the LSU game just sort of confirmed that. But now I think if you lose at home to an Alabama team who is struggling, that represents program issues. It's not about the season anymore, because as you said, Mark, it does lead you to believe that they've laid down. There's no reason to lose at home to Alabama. Now, when they go to Tuscaloosa, I expect that crowd of about 3,000 in that dark dungeon gym and their slow-paced offense and their pretty good defense they play. I expect for them to just bog Arkansas down. The final score will be like 52-39. They'll beat Arkansas. That's what I expect to happen in Alabama.
God, 39 points.
Yeah, well, it's like
this horrible.
Remember the Stan Heath game against Auburn? They lost like 52-37 or something, like one of his first years. I mean, that's what Alabama does at home. They bog you down. They have athletes. They play good defense. There's only 2,000 people in their gym. It's dark. It's low energy, and they just kind of grind people. But this is at home in Bud Walton. I know Relaford. He's one of the best scoring guards in the country to me in terms of getting his own shot, being a headache. But I expect Arkansas to get the job done. If not, then we start revisiting the program-related questions.
Yeah, man, if they can't get this win, it'll be trouble. All right. Well, the reason I mention that is because this could start a chance for Arkansas winning the game tonight. You get to, what would that be, 3-6 in conference. Then you travel on the road to Vanderbilt, who, 4-4 in the conference, but they're not world beaters by any means. Another shot, and I'm not going to say that they're going to get a road win ever again. So until they get a road win, I'm just going to assume that they're going to lose. But if you get a 2-game winning streak going in there before you head into Missouri, I know that that's a rat trap most of the time. You go in there and get your butt kicked, but
right.
You got a shot to make some noise coming down the stretch. Man, I'm trying my best here to make things sound as positive as possible for Arkansas. Did you hear anything news-wise about Michael Qualls and Alandis Harris suspension? Because I heard some rumors that the suspension was already over.
Yeah, it's been lifted. They're
I was just making
in,
sure.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've been really, really busy with all this other junk, so I haven't been able to confirm it. But, one game, an indefinite suspension equals 1 game.
Yeah, and that's not really sitting well with some people. I heard some people say that kind of reminds them of the John Pelphrey era.
Yeah, what did they do? Do we know for sure?
We have no idea. It can't be anything too serious. That's another thing I drew from it. I mean, if I thought something maybe it was more serious, but I don't know. Maybe this is one of those I'm tired of your garbage, I'm tired of your laziness type suspension to me. That's what I got from it. But, Arkansas, if they do win this game, then they're able to play Vanderbilt. I mean, I don't know. It just reminds me of the game Michael Sanchez had at Vanderbilt, where
best game of his life.
Best game of his life combined. Like all the games he's ever played combined were just concentrated in that game at Vanderbilt. Maybe Arkansas can win this game against Alabama, have another performance like that against Vanderbilt, and then it's up to you at home. What does Arkansas have to do for you to start feeling good about them again? Because I think if they can win 2 games, all of a sudden we at least don't hate them the way we do right now.
Hate's a strong word, but I can tell you that I'm not going out of my way. I wouldn't cross the street to watch them play.
Yeah.
Just saying, I definitely wouldn't spend any money on it. But yeah, that's an interesting question about what it would do for Arkansas to win those 2 games. My question is, who would be the Michael Sanchez that would have a great game at Vanderbilt? If there's one guy that you might say he's I don't know, maybe just a hustle guy who turns in a 25, 30-point game like Michael Sanchez did, be like a Moses Kingsley or somebody else.
I have too much respect for Kingsley to put him in that. I mean, it would be unlikely for him to do that. I'm going to go with, Michael Sanchez was a little bit of a clumsy type player. Like when he scored, it was kind of like he did it on accident type deal. I could see Ja'Cory Williams. Like if he scored a lot of points, I would get that same this is an accident type feel as I did with Michael Sanchez. And look, Ja'Cory's a good athlete. He tries hard. Skill level's not quite there. And that reminds me of something else. SEC basketball. SEC basketball, I've come to the conclusion. Athletically, the SEC is a top 3 basketball conference. Skill-wise, the SEC is behind the Great American Conference in skill level. I think that's how I look at it. Great athleticism, no skill. We have a lot of runners and jumpers in this league. We have nobody that can shoot in the SEC. Nobody can dribble in the SEC. I really think that's what's wrong with SEC basketball. The athletes are there. We just don't have any skill. I've come to that conclusion.
Well, you're probably onto something. There's some skill in certain teams. It's just very highly concentrated.
Yeah, like 2 or 3
one or 2 teams. Yeah, Kentucky and Florida don't have any problem with getting skilled players. It's just everybody else sort of left out of that loop. So, all right, man, we just run out of time today. Lots of stuff we've covered in an hour. We appreciate you joining us on today's National Signing Day special. Appreciate Weldon for holding down the fort in the first half of the show. Jason Kilburn for calling in and helping us out with recruiting. Brad giving his thoughts as well on the recruiting class. We hope that we've got some good news. Maybe 2 5-stars choose Arkansas over the next hour or 2, and the Hogs fill out that class nicely. But either way, I think that there's some needs that were filled and some guys who are going to step in and play immediately. In Arkansas, we're just hoping. We're crossing our fingers with you. Look, we're fans too. Hopefully they'll get this junk righted so that Arkansas football can be relevant once more. Maybe the Hogs can get a basketball win tonight. Boy, they better hope they do, or we're going to come in and hammer them on Friday. So we'll be back at 11 o'clock on Friday with more Sports Blitz at rivervalleyleader.com. For Weldon and Maddie and our callers, I'm Mark saying so long. We'll see you at 11 o'clock on Friday morning.